Hey, I'm Mike, and this is how you solo Mythic Ny'alotha the Waking City for a chance at the Ny'alotha Allseer Maut. This raid's located in the kind of the middle section of Uldum, and it needs to be on Mythic because a mount will only drop on Mythic, and if you think this is clickbait, it is not. Blizzard just made a couple of changes a couple days ago that made this finally fully soloable. So when you first enter the raid, there's going to be some RP, and then Wrathion the dragon will spawn. Mechanics wise, I was kind of just standing in everything throughout this raid just to see what did damage, what I should move out for, and see if there's anything worth noting. So as those things come up, I will definitely make note of them. But on this boss, there wasn't really much to note. He obviously has some dragon mechanics like a frontal breath and some stacking dots and stuff. But other than that, the only thing that was really kind of different was that at a certain point, you'll see it coming up here shortly, is he turns into like a cloud of dust and then he moves away into some other part of the room. When he does this, he's going to fill the entire floor with lava, and I stood in the lava as well. It didn't do that much damage, so you can just stand in that if you'd like. But if I remember correctly, I believe the mechanic is that there is a specific section of the floor that is not covered in lava that you can stand in to not take damage. So if you're not as geared, or if you are starting to take damage, and he's doing the thing I was talking about now where he's going to start covering the floor in lava, if you're not as geared and you are taking damage, you might want to look for that safe spot. I think when I'm doing it here, it'll be kind of to the left, yeah, that little section to the left there. I think that's the safe spot, but I might be wrong. But you're going to want to run over there and stand in that. So on my warrior, he didn't really take that much damage, but he also has self-heals with Bloodthirst, Victory Rush, and Enrage Regeneration, which I don't think I used in this raid, but he has those options if needed. I came in here on my 496 item level Fire Mage, and I could not kill Wrathion because I didn't do enough damage, but I think that just might be rotational on my end. And I also was taking enough damage where I died. I couldn't actually kill Wrathion, so this might be not soloable yet for everyone, but it is soloable for certain classes. Specifically, if you have a healing class, or like a class that can heal themselves, probably a lot easier, and you can survive a lot of the mechanics that, for example, my mage could not. I wasn't sure if I should speed up the runs in between bosses because there is quite a bit of running. I know in the past videos people have not liked that I sped up the walking in between bosses because if they've never been here before, they liked being able to follow along with me. So there's for the bosses near the end when you've already seen all the mechanics and it's just kind of not keeping you here for too long because this video is already like, what, 45 minutes? I do speed up the end of certain bosses, but the walks in between bosses, I'll try to keep those at, I do keep those at normal speed just so that way, again, if you've never been here before, you can kind of see what's going on. Couple things I just want to make sure to mention while I'm still walking there is one, I keep my map open for the entirety of the raid so that if you've never been here before, you have a better sense of direction. This was recorded on Saturday, May 11th, 2024 in patch 10.2.7.54630 of Dragonflight. And in this video, I am a level 70 Fury Warrior with an item level of 506, I believe it was. On this next boss, Maut, he has a bunch of ads on the platform with him. They all need to die. I wasn't sure of that when I started pulling these, so I only pulled the elites, and then I noticed afterwards that the boss was still not becoming active. So I then killed all the little bugs around the room, and then the boss became active after a couple seconds of RP. In terms of ads, I do speed up pretty much all of the ad fights in this raid because they're ads. They have none of the mechanics matter, so irrelevant. And again, I'm trying to not make this video be super long, so where I can try to speed things up, I do. On the boss, he has a few things to note. He has some sort of pull mechanic where he puts a purple circle around you and starts pulling you towards a like purple portal. It's not that hard to run against it, so just run against it. I'm not entirely sure what that does, but I imagine it's probably not great. This mechanic right here, as you can see, it's not that strong of a pull, so just move around and run away from that. He puts a purple circle around you and then drops that on the floor, which is a silence. So if you're a caster, make sure you're not standing in that. And if you want to put that in specific places, you can, but it doesn't really matter. You can just kite the boss away from them. If you don't kill the boss quick enough, what's going to happen is that he's going to put in a damage immunity on himself. And when he does this, any damage you do is reflected back at you, which maybe don't, go crazy on the damage. I actually didn't notice it doing that much damage to myself, so maybe do go crazy on the damage. It wasn't that bad. But during that phase, and you'll see it in this video shortly, instead of taking damage as health, all the damage he'll be taking is in the form of mana. So you want to, when he gets, and this is the phase right here, he puts on the absorb, and what you want to do is you want to get his mana to 0, so all the damage you're doing is actually doing damage to his mana. So when his mana gets to 0 is when the boss becomes active again. this Obsidian's Shatter cast, if he does end up casting it within the minute, if you don't get this absorb off within the next minute, it's like 80,000 damage. It's really not that big of a deal, so if you can't out DPS it, it's not going to wipe you. While this is happening, there are blue orbs that are moving towards the boss. Make sure to absorb those, because if they hit the boss, they 100% restore his mana, so you're just going to be here for a little bit longer. So just make sure they're not hitting them, because you don't obviously want that. But other than that, there's nothing really important on this fight. The white circle that you're getting when you absorb the orbs, I believe is just a small damage thing for you. It doesn't do that much, at least not on my warrior again, but yeah. Moving on to the next boss, which by the way, you don't have to go the way that I went. You could have gone right instead of left, and then just made your way to this boss third, but I just went this way. Just really quick, I want to make note that I never did this raid when it was current content. I think I've done this video, I think it's probably the 4th time I've ever run it. The first one was, I think back when it was BFA, I came in here with my guild who was doing a Glory of the Raider run. I think I missed a few bosses, but they were already like cutting edge, so I just kind of plowed through everything and didn't really know the mechanics. There was one time I came in here, I believe just to do the last boss on Heroic to get the Mount and the Ahead of the Curve achievement. And then I think a month ago I came in here with a pug to do a quick transmog / Mount / achievement run just to get all the mythic kills. So if so any mechanics that I'm talking about, one of the things I really hate about older Mount run videos when I didn't know the fights was the entirety of the video was spent with me saying, I don't know, something happens and you do this thing. I don't know the name and what happens, so just whatever, figure it out. And that's kind of annoying just as me, the creator, to go back and listen to those, but for you, the viewer, also, it's kind of annoying. So what I did is I went, after doing this run, I went through the dungeon journal just to kind of get a little bit more information and context as to what is actually happening on certain mechanics and what to look out for. Overall, on my warrior, mechanics didn't really matter, but there are still some things I want to point out and make sure that you are aware of what's going on. So if you're someone who has more experience in this raid and I misspeak or I said something incorrectly or just straight up wrong, definitely just let me know in the comments, because again, I didn't do this when it was current content. I'm only doing this years later as a farmer. So if anything's wrong, be gentle, please. But the majority of the trash in this place can be skipped. Fortunately, once we get these 3 bosses down, you are able to mount for parts of the raid moving forward, so it's not this painfully slow. And I don't know, I wish there was something kind of like Amir still has, where you can kind of stand in a little circle. It gives you like 100% speed buff. If you had speed buffs, if you have speed buffs, you can definitely use them, of course. As a warrior, I do have Heroic Leap, which I didn't want to use because, again, if anyone's in here for the first time and they want to follow along, I don't want to be going ahead of them or anything like that. So if you have those boosts, definitely do that. The next boss is Prophet Skitra. The ads in front of the boss you do not have to kill. If you want, you can, but it doesn't really matter. The boss doesn't... I'll try not to say this a lot because it can be kind of tedious to hear it all the time, but the boss doesn't have too many mechanics to care about. There's like a stacking dot throughout the fight, which again doesn't do that much damage. At least on my warrior, again, if you're here on lower item levels, it might be different, but hopefully you know that. The main thing about this fighting, I don't know if it's percent based or if it's just time based, but the boss at certain points will split off into 4 clones. And what the mechanic used to be is that, and it's coming up right here, so what the mechanic used to be is that half of the raid would get a red debuff, and the other half of the raid would get a blue debuff. And the red debuffs would only see the red clones, and the blue debuffs would only see the blue clones. But there was one clone that was in the same physical location on both ends. So for example, I think in this phase, this clone that I'm fighting here, I have the red debuff, so the blue debuffs would see this boss in this same spot on their end, but the other ads that I killed and see, they would not see those. They would see the boss in different positions. So the mechanic was that blue and red would have to coordinate and say, okay, I see the same boss in this corner. Do you see this? Yes, kill it. That's the clone. Because you're soloing it, you're not going to be able to figure out which one is the actual clone. As far as I know, if anyone knows a way to figure that out, let me know. But because you're soloing it, you don't have the blue, or you don't have the opposite debuff to figure out where the same position is. So you're just going to be killing clones until you find the right one, and then the fight just kind of restarts. Again, I don't know if the clone mechanic is time-based or percent-based, but I think I just did it twice in this fight, so hopefully it's not a whole lot. Hopefully it doesn't happen too many times. So this raid is from the Battle for Azeroth expansion. I believe that came out in 2018, and I remember at the time I was stoked for this because, at least based on the cinematic that came out, it felt very much so that WoW was going back in sort of like a Horde versus Alliance story of some sorts, and there was kind of internal conflict rather than saving the world conflict. And I was just really, really stoked. The cinematic looked awesome. The gameplay kind of looked interesting. I played the heck out of the beta on this to the point where I think I run through all the zones numerous times. I had mastered all the dungeons by the end of the beta, and which ended up being kind of a hindrance because I burnt myself out very, very quickly. And as I started getting more and more into the systems, I realized I really, really do not like this expansion. The systems that were out, like the war fronts and the island expeditions, just weren't all that interesting. The zones themselves were probably my least favorite zones of all time. The Heart of Azeroth artifact was... I've never really been the biggest fan of the artifacts when they were introduced in Legion just because of how grindy they were. I definitely feel like, in a way, the Heart of Azeroth was a little bit less grindy, but it was still just as grindy in a way. And it was very frustrating having to like I forget how it completely worked now, but there was like, you would get, they're not gems, but essentially they kind of work like gems where you unlock specific gems that would have different attributes for your skills. And then later on in the expansion, so I think I quit for like a year and a half or so, and then I came back in the last season when this was the main raid. And there were, I think at some point they had introduced, and by the way, don't stand underneath that elevator, it will kill you. So don't do that. But they had introduced, I forget what they were called, but there was like rank 1 through 4, I believe, of some sort of like glyph or gem or something for your Heart of Azeroth. And I think getting rank, I don't know if it was rank 3 and 4 or just rank 4, but getting one of those last ranks was such a grind and so tedious and so annoying, and just, it wasn't fun at all. And like, I remember there was the visions, the nightmare visions. It was like Storm and Orgrimmar, you went in and you had to like do these visions, and it was just so tedious and boring, and I did not like this expansion, almost any part of it. And this was the last expansion I raided progressively in. By the first raid, Allseer, I was already pretty much burnt out, but by the time that 2 boss raid came out, I was completely done. And at that point is when if you were around, then I made that video, and you can mount here now finally, is when I made that video that I'm taking a break because I don't, WoW feels like a job, and I already have a job, and I don't want to do all the Mythic Pluses. I don't want to spend all this time gearing up, getting raid ready, just so I can raid for 2 hours or 3 hours a day and bash my head against the boss I don't care about. BFA was probably my least favorite expansion, and I'll talk more about that shortly, but just in this section, you have the choice as to where you want to go. You can go left, right, straight. I'm just going to go this way. If you're more familiar with this and you have a specific route, or if in the future you like a specific route better, you can go whichever way you'd prefer. There's not a mandatory way to go about this, so you can go down below and do the Il'gynoth stuff first, or go over and do Wrathion first, or Raiden. I don't know how to say that name, but I'm just going this way because this just how I did it. But on this next fight, Dark Inquisitor Xanesh, the behemoth at the front there, you don't have to kill, but there are a couple of groups of ads, which include a couple of occult Shadowmenders. You do want to kill them because that will get the boss down, and then you can start the fight. For this, there's a few things to note. One is there's a few obelisks that come out, which you'll see here shortly. There is a red circle around them, which is bad. It puts while you're in that red circle, and you can see it right here, it puts a dot on you, and it also slows you down. The dot isn't that hectic, so I mean, if you wanted to, you can, but don't stand in that. This void ritual that's happening right now will spawn 3 circles, and you can just ignore them at this point if your DPS is good. It basically, if no one soaks any of the circles, it does a small AoE. It's kind of negligible, that AoE, but if you do soak it, you get a Void Woken, I believe it's a debuff, which reduces all your damage by it reduces all your damage by 99% for 40 seconds. And the way to get rid of this is that there will be an orb that comes out that I believe already did come out, and if you touch it, it bounces away in the direction you're facing, and it will remove that debuff. But if that orb eventually, which it will, hits the Queen Azshara, I hope I said that right, in the middle, if that orb hits an obelisk with one of the red circles around it, or it hits one of the edges of the room, it does an AoE which hits harder each time that happens, and it also increases the boss's attack speed by 50% for 30 seconds. So if you're a slower DPS, you may want to consider soaking the Void Ritual and kind of trying your best to make sure that orb doesn't hit any of those things I mentioned in the 30 seconds that the boss has that debuff. I actually don't know if the raid-wide AoE that the orb does stacks, or if that is also 30 seconds, but in either case, that's the mechanic there. There's also an Awakened Terror ad, which has a Terror Wave cast, you want to interrupt that, because if you don't, you'll be feared for 3 seconds, which is just annoying more than anything. So this elevator, I believe, again, this is another one that can kill you, so don't be standing underneath elevators. When you get up here, there is going to be a room, with no ads in this one, but there is another one similar to this later on that does have some ads, and there are some ads on the platform when you get to the next boss, Vexiona. There's, again, I sped it up, but you kill all these ads, and then there's 2 void ascendants that will spawn, and then you kill them, and then the boss becomes active. So this boss is actually one that, on my warrior, is probably the most, like, I didn't get close to dying, but it's definitely one that I could see myself dying in if I wasn't high enough DPS, and I'll explain why here in a second. So this boss has a frontal cone, which this boss in general has different mechanics that put a permanent stacking dot on you that does increasingly, obviously, more damage. And by the end of this fight, I got to like 117 stacks of this, and it was doing something like 50,000 damage per, I think it's every second or every 3 seconds. Yeah, it's every 50,000 damage every 3 seconds with each stack. So 50 times 100, whatever that is, that was doing, oh no, sorry. I think it was 50,000, sorry, let me correct myself. I got to 117 stacks, I think it was, and I was taking 50,000 damage every 3 seconds. So let's just say 100 stacks, 50k damage. It's not a lot, but it definitely can be impactful. Obviously, as you get here with more item level and later expansions, it's not going to be as difficult, but it was rough. The frontal breath is what kind of puts the most stacks on me, I found, and there's no way to avoid that. She just follows the tank, which, if you're soloing it, of course, will be you. If you're slow enough and the boss gets to 100 energy, she'll fly around and cast a breath in an area 3 times before landing, so just don't stand in that if you can. I didn't get that in this video, I DPS through that. But then the last phase will spawn when she does that cast that she just did. I forget the name of it now. But throughout this, she will... throughout this, she spawns ads, I believe, and there are... The Shadow of Vexiona does kind of that breath mechanic that I was talking about, where, as you saw, there was that little pool on the ground that kind of just goes around the room, and if you stand in that, you're taking more stacks of that dot, so don't stand in that. Just really quick, after you kill the boss, there is a reorigination anchor to go back to the main path, so instead of walking back, definitely click on that and save yourself some time. But sorry, the ads that I was talking about, they spawn throughout the fight until the boss gets to 40% health. Let me correct myself there. She doesn't spawn ads after 40% health. The ads are irrelevant. And then during the last phase, you get a debuff that decreases your haste by 100%. So you're just a little bit slower, which is a little bit annoying. After that, I'm going to go down to the underground of Ny'alotha, which is probably my least favorite part of it. But just as I'm going back to what I was talking about BFA, it was definitely my least favorite expansion. And looking back now, it's kind of funny because at the time, I hated Warlords of Draenor, because it was simply just raid logging. You log in, raid, there's nothing to do, and then you log off. And at the time I hated it, but after Legion and BFA, especially Shadowlands, I miss it. And my guild leader and I are pretty much the only ones at the moment that kind of agree on this, but Warlords of Draenor was my favorite expansion because of how simple it was. There was nothing to do. I could just log on, raid, and that's it. I didn't have to go do mythics. I didn't have to farm artifact power. I didn't have to do like weekly events. Like, it was just nothing. I love that. And I think Dragonflight a little bit got back into the nothingness of that all. I don't have to really do anything, but there's something about Warlords, which I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but Warlords of Draenor was, IMO, the best expansion for someone like myself who just wants to not do a whole lot, or not feel like I have to do a whole lot. The next boss is Shad'har the Insatiable. He has a stacking buff on him called Hungry, and at 10 stacks he does 250% more damage. I don't really understand this mechanic, because what'll happen is that a living miasma glob will spawn and fixate on you and then explode when it touches you. It's not an ad you can target, and you're going to see it here. It just kind of comes towards you, explodes, and then it drops an item on the ground, that red light. If you pick that up, it gives you a 15-second debuff called Tasty Morsel, which you can apparently feed that to the boss to decrease the amount of stacks he has, but I don't really understand how you feed that to the boss. I didn't know that when I was fighting him, so I don't know if you just walk into him, because I feel like I was pretty close to him already. I didn't see any sort of extra action button, so I'm thinking it's just you walk into him, but at no point do I think I actually did that mechanic. So as you're going to see, he takes that 250% more damage throughout the entirety of the fight, which didn't do that much to me. Other than that, he has in the first phase, he does Umbral Breath, which will fear you for 10 seconds if you're caught in that. So just make sure you're not standing in that. You saw me get feared because I didn't know what that did. I sped that up as well because it's kind of annoying to watch me get feared for 10 seconds, but definitely do not stand in that. That only happens in the first phase, which lasts from 100% to 66%, and then 66 to 33 is phase 2, and the last phase starts at 33%. No major changes throughout the phases. The only thing really to note is that at 30% health, the boss gets 25% more damage, which I do believe stacks the Hungry debuff. So if he has the Hungry debuff as well as at 30% Enrage, he'll be doing 275% more damage, which again, as you can see, my health is kind of getting, underneath 80% at certain times. There's a couple things not to stand in here. It's kind of self-explanatory. But again, playing a warrior with Bloodthirst mostly, and I think Victory Rush here and there, having those self-heals is more than enough to keep me alive through here. When I said this was my least favorite zone, or least favorite area of the raid, I don't really know, like, I can't really put my finger as to why. It's just, this raid as a whole, I don't really like. People seem to have fond memories of it, I guess. I've heard a lot of good things, but for whatever reason, I don't know, I just don't like it. I don't really, the old god stuff doesn't really interest me all that much. I don't really care, and I don't really like the aesthetic of it all, and just, I don't know, I can't really put my finger on it. I just, for some reason, do not like this raid, but also specifically this area where you're going down and kind of going down in the depths of Ny'alotha and fighting all this stuff. The next boss we're going to be coming up against is Drest'agath, and this was one that I didn't that I spent a little bit extra time here because I really did not understand the mechanics as I was doing this fight. So there's going to be tentacles that spawn around the room, and actually before I talk about that, the boss has a buff on himself that heals him for 765,000 health every 5 seconds. Now the tentacles around the room, when you kill them, they drop a pool on the ground, and you can pick up that pool and you can damage the boss. And any damage you do is damage that the boss cannot heal back. So that buff that he has, it does, let's say you did 1 million damage to him, that 1 million damage, sorry, let me clarify, if you do 1 million damage to him with the buff you got from one of the tentacles, the boss cannot heal that 1 million damage. So the mechanic here, which you're going to see I'm not really doing, is you want to kill a tentacle, pick up the claw, or pick up the thing they drop, and then fight the boss, and then wait, because after that buff expires from you, that 30-second buff, which is called Void Infused Ichor, once that goes away, you cannot pick up another pool from one of these mobs for about another 90 seconds. So essentially, I would just sit there. If in the future, what I'll be doing is I will kill a tentacle, I'll pick up the glob, fight the boss for 30 seconds, and then continue fighting the boss until that debuff that I have that no longer allows me to pick up the orb or pool on the ground goes away, pick that up again, and then continue fighting the boss. If you want to, you can kill all the tentacles if they're doing extra damage to you, but again, they weren't doing a whole lot here, but I'd imagine that the room might fill up with a whole lot of them, or maybe they're just kind of hard capped at how many spawn at a certain time. But that is what you do. What I ended up doing, since I didn't know that the pool mechanic existed, I kind of just powered through the boss. I did more damage than his heal could heal for in every 5 seconds, so I think I went through 2 or 3 of the tentacles, and then eventually I just kind of sat on the boss and just focused on him, didn't really pay much attention to the tentacles, and it took a little bit longer than it should have, but moving forward, now that I know how that works, I'll be doing what I said earlier, and now that you know how this works, you can also not spend, I think it was like 5 minutes or so that I spent here on this boss fighting him. And again, and this will be another one that is a great example of when you get more gear and later on in expansions, this is going to be much quicker, and you're probably going to have to be able to ignore, or you will be able to ignore the pool mechanic almost entirely. Other than that, throughout the fight, there's some raid-wide AoEs, there's a debuff that increases the damage you take for a bit. Nothing major, so just kind of focus on the boss, focus on the pools, and hopefully it doesn't take that long. On the way to the last boss, Il'gynoth, I was able to skip some of this or actually all this trash. Fortunately, so for some reason the other trash throughout the little tunnel here was pulling every once in a while, so that was annoying, especially the tentacles, because they are rooted in place and they can't just follow you to the next boss. So that was a little bit annoying, but the last boss in this specific section is Il'gynoth, which if you played Legion, you recognize that name because that was one of the bosses in the Emerald Nightmare raid, which I remember being a very, very annoying raid boss at the time, and this version of Il'gynoth is much less frustrating, so really glad to see that. So Il'gynoth kind of sits in the center of the room, he doesn't move. So what's going to happen is that there will be there's 3 eyes on the walls of the room, and periodically what they'll do is they'll shoot a purple line at you that follows you around for like 5 or 6 seconds. And as that is following you, it is leaving pools on the ground that if you stand in will silence you. So if you're a melee, and you'll see in this video by the end of it that the melee section of this boss kind of gets a little bit full with all these silences. So if you're a little bit slower, you may want to, instead of going around the boss, when you get that purple line on you, kite it away from the boss towards the walls and then kind of go back to the boss. But you're going to have to kill this boss 4 times. The first 3 times when you do this, there's going to be 3 organs of corruption that you're seeing me fight right now that will spawn. And once you kill 1 organ of corruption, the other 2 go away. Il'gynoth respawns, you kill Il'gynoth, fight a corruption, organ of corruption, kill him, organ, then kill him 1 more time. When you're fighting the organ, it has a interruptible cast called Pumping Blood. If that goes off, a Blood of Ny'alotha glob will spawn and it just puts a stacking dot on you that also does a small AoE when it dies. Nothing hectic. There's also a Clotted Corruption mob that spawns during that phase. Again, just AoE it down. And you'll also notice during that phase there is, and I think I may even have it now. Yeah, so there's a red circle around you that gets smaller and bigger. And basically when it gets to its maximum size, it does a raid-wide AoE. But it is a curse. If you can decurse, you can remove it. And if you want to minimize the damage you're taking, you want to remove that curse when the circle is the smallest, because the AoE it deals upon being decursed is based on how big that circle is. But overall, this fight is pretty simple, one of the easier ones. Literally just kill the boss, kill an organ, kill the boss, kill an organ, kill the boss, kill an organ, kill the boss. And the adds that spawn here are completely irrelevant and don't do a whole lot. Once you kill this boss, there is yet another reorigination anchor to go back to the main path. So definitely, instead of walking all the way back up, take that, it'll take you back to where you need to go, and then you can head over to the last section. So again, if you've been following the guide exactly the way that I've been doing it, we're going to be fighting a couple more bosses before the last 2. But if you've been, I guess this one had 3, so, but if you've been doing it a different direction, just make sure you're using those orbs and getting all these, because you do need to kill all the bosses before you do the last 2. So making my way to essentially the straight path. So I went right first, and then I went left to go underground. Now I'm going straight. So going back to what I was talking about with the expansions, like I said, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but Warlords, looking back, was definitely my favorite expansion, just because of how simple it was. Like I said, Dragonflight kind of went back to that, where the first time where I felt like I didn't need to play, like if I didn't play for a couple weeks, I didn't feel like I'd completely fallen behind, which was a great feeling and what I'm was really missing from the last few expansions. And I think one of the things it did well was it kind of gave me that feeling of Warlords where I didn't necessarily need to play the game, but if I wanted to play the game, there was a lot of things I could do, whether it was any of the weekly events or like the hourly events or world quests, for example, or literally anything in that the game had to offer. There was a whole bunch of stuff you could do, which I did like. So Dragonflight is kind of nipping at the heels of Warlords for my favorite expansion. Moving to this fight, there are a bunch of adds. Again, you want to kill before. You actually don't necessarily need to kill them, but they're probably going to be annoying during the fight, so you can kill them before you start the fight. And then this will be the Hivemind boss, aka Tek'ris and Khazir. I'm just going to call Tek'ris Tetris, because that's kind of what it looks like. Neither of these 2 bosses share a health pool, so you do want to make sure you're kind of damaging them equally, because when one dies, he has a 10-second cast, and if the other one is still alive after that 10-second cast, the boss you killed will heal to full. So just kill them within 10 seconds of each other, split the damage on them, and there will be no issues. Khazir has an interruptible, and Khazir is the smaller of the 2. Khazir has a interruptible mind-numbing Novacast, which just puts an 8-second dot on you that also reduces your haste by 100%. So make sure when you can, you are either interrupting that or you're spell reflecting that, because that can be spell reflected if you have that ability. He also spawns acidic bugs that will roll around, which you're going to see here. They spawn in those green circles. I don't believe they're targetable, and they just kind of roll around, and if they hit you, they will apply a 16-second dot on you that also increases your damage taken by 50%. I wasn't really too concerned about getting hit, but again, if you are someone who's taking more damage, that's just one avoidable mechanic you can focus on if you want to decrease the amount of damage you are taking. And then finally, Tek'ris, he just has a Nullification Blast, which is a frontal cone. If you get hit by that, it applies a 6-second dot and reduces any healing effects on you by 100%. So I believe that is hard. He freezes in place when he casts that, so just move out of that and it won't be that big of a deal. This is another elevator where, again, you don't want to stand under. This one I don't know for sure if it'll kill you, but I'm almost positive now. Every elevator in WoW does kill you, so don't stand under elevators. In this room, there's a bunch of non-elite ads. You might be able to skip some, if not all of them, if you're lucky, but you're probably going to pull some, so just AoE them down. And at the end of the hallway, there is a Crusher ad that's elite that you can kill as well. The ads in this section, you do not need to kill to start the fight. They do not pull with the boss. But this boss is Wrathion or Raiden. I'm just going to call him Raiden because I just prefer that, even though it's wrong, probably. But there's a tank. The tank mechanic in this fight is that when the boss gets to 100 energy, he's supposed to put a stacking 25-second debuff on you that decreases your health by 25%. But I never saw that actually apply on my warrior, so I don't know if that was like a bug or if that's one of the things they fixed. But just keep that in mind in case it happens. Throughout the fight, he's going to be spawning 2 orbs that you're seeing here, as well as 1 elemental right behind him that will move towards the boss. Killing one of those things will make the other 2 immune to damage. And basically the mechanic was that depending on which orb hit the boss, you would have different mechanics. None of the mechanics the boss gets matter. They are completely irrelevant. They don't do that much damage. It's pretty much all like just like an AoE, basically. It's something that does extra damage to you. It's very, very negligible. But if the boss gets the same buff twice, I believe, within like a 3-minute span, he does 300% more damage. Which that specifically is not stacking, but he does 300% more damage. So if you want to follow that mechanic, which again, side note, take the reorigination anchor back to the main path once you've killed him. If you want to focus on that, just make sure that you're killing different orbs each time they come out, so that way he's not getting the same buffs twice in a row, or twice within a 3-minute span. Once you kill him, you have only 2 bosses left to do, and you're going to, once I show you on the map here, I'll reopen it shortly. You're going to be making your way straight up down the center, and there's going to be a bunch of mobs on this bridge, and because they're just regular old mobs, I sped this up because it's not really that important. You do need to kill all the mobs on this bridge, because without doing that, the portal to the last section of the raid will not open. So as you see, I killed those ads, the portal became available. So you're going to go into that portal, and you're going to encounter the last, or the second to last boss, I should say, which is the ad is called the Fury of N'Zoth, but the encounter in the dungeon journal is called the Carapace of N'Zoth. So I'm probably just going to refer to it as the Fury. But you're going to talk to Wrathion, and there is a quick cutscene that you can watch if you'd like. Make sure that if you don't have it already, you pick up the quest there that is the skip quest. So I believe it's to kill this boss 4 times, and then you can just skip just to do these last 2 bosses, which will be very, very nice. I think you have to do Wrathion, but after that you can just go straight to the last 2, which will save you a bunch of time. So definitely pick that up, because it is well worth it. So the ads here, I'm not 100% sure if you fight them. I assume you do. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I just kind of killed all the ads, and there was a little bit of RP, and after like 3 or so minutes, the boss became targetable. So there was nothing specific I needed to do after that initial interaction with Wrathion. So this is where a lot of the nerfs that they did a couple days ago, Blizzard that is, come into play. So in this fight, there is a sanity bar you can see kind of on the lower right near my mini-map. That no longer matters. The extra action button is a cloak, which I believe helps you with your sanity. The sanity no longer is a mechanic you have to worry about, because what it used to do is that when you ran out of sanity, you would get like a 15-second buff, I think, and then you would become mind controlled. That no longer happens. If you lose all your sanity, what will happen is you still get that 15-second buff, but then you just restore sanity. So it's completely fine to ignore anything that's actually beneficial for you to go insane and to not worry about your sanity, because it just gives you a buff. In this first phase, you saw there was a couple of shadows that came down on the ground and the tentacles slammed on them. Don't stand in those shadows, because I think it'll stun you for probably around 5 or so seconds. I don't remember the exact time. It's very similar to the time rift in Dragonflight, so just don't stand in that. Once the boss gets to, I think it's 40% health, what'll happen is that he'll run down this tunnel, at which point there are a bunch of mycelial cysts that are slowing you down and doing some damage. to you. Just do some AoE to remove how large that effect is that is slowing you down, and make your way to the left or right side. Doesn't matter which one you go first, you have to do both. On the walls, you'll notice that there are synthesis growths. They have a small absorb shield on them, but once you do enough damage, that breaks, and you want to kill. There's 16 in total across the 2 sides, so 8 per side. You want to kill all 16 of these because the boss has a debuff on him that makes him immune to damage, and if you target the boss, you can see how many stacks he has, and that's how many synthesis growths are left. So if by chance you think you've killed all the growths, but the boss still has like 1 or 2 stacks, you'll know you've missed one. But you kill all 8 on one side, go to the other side, and kill the others, and that's when the boss will go to the final portion of the fight. The Siths in here are probably the most annoying because they, like I said, they slow you down by quite a lot, and it's just really, really annoying. So any sort of AoE, they're not elites, they don't have that much health, I spam Whirlwind to kind of get them down. So as you're seeing, I killed the last one here, and the boss is going to start running into the last phase, into the last section. In this section, I believe what the mechanic was is that you would want to fight the boss not where he's standing, because when you're standing in this section, you're just losing sanity constantly, which again, like I said, is now a good thing. You do want to lose sanity because you get that, it's like a 15% damage buff and like 25% more healing, and then you just restore your sanity. So I fought him here. It kind of lets you ignore some of the other mechanics as well in this last phase, which is more cysts. I believe the tentacles that come down on the ground also spawn here. I think there might be a couple other mechanics that just kind of you can ignore completely. Just focus on the boss here, stand in the little puddle here. Your screen is going to have a lot of stuff on it, especially when you start getting low on sanity. You're going to see like these little tentacles on the side of your screen, which can be a little bit annoying, but well worth it because again, that damage buff is just essentially a good thing now. Other than that, the boss doesn't really do a whole lot. Once you kill him, there's about a minute of RP after Ny'alotha comes out from the middle of the floor, and then you can start the fight. So if you skipped over here, welcome. When you start the fight, you no longer need the cloak. I'm going to show you here shortly, but I'm not wearing a legendary cloak, so I don't automatically get mind controlled. And in this first phase, there's going to be tentacles spawning around the room. Just go around killing them. They are irrelevant. Just kill them. While I'm talking about that, if you missed the last boss, what I was talking about is that sanity is no longer a bad thing. If you lose all your sanity in the past, what would happen is that you'd get like a 15-second buff, and then you would become mind controlled. What Blizzard changed this to is that after that 15-second buff goes away, you no longer become mind controlled. Your sanity just resets to 30. So it's actually beneficial for you to lose all your sanity because you get a buff that makes you do more damage and take more healing. So whenever possible, lose all your sanity, which is a fantastic change. I'm really glad they did that. So as you're seeing here, I'm not wearing the legendary cloak. I don't even have it equipped. I don't even have it in my bag. And in case it matters, I don't even have the Heart of Azeroth equipped. It's also not in my bag as well. So in this first phase, like I said, you're just killing these tentacles until eventually you get a message on your screen that says a mind gate opens to the mind of Ny'alotha, which I'm walking towards now. When you walk through that, it takes you to the mind of Ny'alotha, which kind of has more tentacles available in that room. They are not your primary focus though. There is an ad here called Tek'ris. He puts a dot on you. Other than that, nothing really matters. He has an interruptible cast, which you can interrupt if you'd like. You want to kill this mob as quickly as possible to get out of the mind. And one thing to note is that if you kill tentacles near him, he gets a stacking buff that increases the damage he takes. So you may as well just kill some tentacles near him to kill him quicker. You'll notice that I did this part incorrectly, and you'll see the second time we go into this phase, it's correct. So once you kill the Tek'ris ad, you're going to go back to where you spawned into this room, and you're going to click on the severed consciousness to go back to Ny'alotha. And at this point, the damage absorption that he had on him, which I didn't mention at the start, he takes like 99% less damage. That goes away for 30 seconds, so pop all your cooldowns and go hammy-sammies on him and try to kill as much of him as you can. The one thing I don't know for sure is if the phases are percent-based or time-based, or just like you do this twice and that's it. But after that 30 seconds, he gets that damage absorption again. You go through the same phase 1 again, where you're just running around killing tentacles. About 45 seconds after that absorb goes back up, you'll get another message that says a mind gate opens leading to the mind of Ny'alotha. And once again, you'll go through the same phase with Tek'ris. You want to kill him as quickly as possible. You'll see this time, the second time I'm doing this, I'm staying near where I spawned into this mind because it's much quicker to click on the severed consciousness to get back to Ny'alotha. Now, when I was going through the fight on Wowhead, from what I understood, there might be 3 mind gates that happen. I maybe just out DPS that third one. But if you come out of this specific mind gate with a little bit of a different phase, you might just have to go through one more of these to to continue with the fight. So I only had 2 in this fight. I don't know for sure if that's correct or not, or if that's how everyone's going to experience it. But once I get out of this phase, the main room looks a little bit different. You're going to see, obviously, there's a bunch of tentacles. There's going to be a couple of, I think they're called Thought Harvester ads that just have a Harvest Thoughts cast. You want to stand in that because that reduces your sanity, which, again, is a good thing. The tentacles in this phase are not, they have a bunch of, there's a couple extra ones that you'll see they have the pools around them that are getting bigger. I was just focusing on killing N'Zoth during this phase, and one of the things, I don't know if it's time-based or if it just spawned automatically and I just didn't notice it at first. But one of the things that you'll see here shortly is that when the room looks like this, there's eventually a dimensional gateway that appears. Unlike a mind gate, I didn't see any sort of message on my screen that told me about this, but I'll talk about that shortly. So those are the Thought Harvesters that are casting Harvest Thoughts. I didn't know to stand in that, so I moved out, but you definitely do want to stand in that because after reading into what that does, it just does, it reduces your sanity. So as you see, my main focus here, because N'Zoth doesn't have the absorb on him, I'm focused on him. Once that shield goes back up, what I'm going to do is, I thought initially I had to fight the tentacles, but you'll notice here, I think it's on the opposite side of N'Zoth right now, there is that dimensional gateway that I was talking about. And yeah, it looks like it's just spawning now, as you can kind of see on the left there, and I'll see me go into that now. Once that shows up, you want to click on that, and that is going to transport you to the Chamber of the Heart, or sorry, Chamber of Heart, where you need to kill the Void Spawn Annihilator ad. This guy doesn't do anything important. There was one thing that there was a debuff that I had that just the wording of it made me think that there was like I was gonna wipe, but that expired. I didn't die, barely took any damage, and then continued as normal. So just focus on killing this guy. You notice I have a healing absorption on me. I don't know specifically how. I believe that does come from this mob, but I don't know if it's as long as he's alive, or if there's a specific cast or any sort of specific mechanic that puts it on. But I do have a healing absorb, so that you'll see my health does get to like 50% at that point. But I healed just through bloodthirst. I get through that. Once you kill that, you kill the dimension. Once you kill that mob, you click on the dimensional gateway to go back to N'Zoth. You focus on killing N'Zoth, and that's it. You did it. You hopefully got them out too. So that was Mythic Ny'alotha solo, no longer needing a cape and no longer having to worry about sanity because sanity is a buff now. So good luck. I hope you are able to do this much quicker than I was, and I hope you get them out sooner than later. There's a cinematic afterwards you can also watch if you'd like. But let me know how your runs are going. Let me know if you got it. Let me know what you think. That Ny'alotha is now soloable. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check the description box for any sort of social media and stuff like that. Love you very much.